Welcome to the mysterious Book Emporium. Reese's mother, Wynne, has just saved him from a certain doom by requesting that I travel with her to find out how a tranquil man has been possessed. But what will happen to Cole while he is away? Will he continue to kill? Why don't you take a seat as we continue on with Asunder, chapters 6 through 10. Chapter 6. Reese was leaving the tower, and this scared Cole. He hadn't meant to draw his blade on Reese, and it left him feeling like he betrayed his only friend in the world. While Reese was locked up, he would sit outside his cell, unsure of what to really do. But now, trying to figure out what was going on, Cole follows Night Captain Evangeline. Cole follows her back to her room, and as she begins to undress, he explores the room. He picks up a tiny statue to examine it, but when he sets it back down, the small tap caught the Night Captain's attention. Cole freezes, but Evangeline still doesn't see him. After changing into clean clothes, she takes out a worn book that was hidden in her closet, taking a strong inhale of the parchment. And then there's a knock on her door. She stashes away the book and calls out for the person to enter. It's Lord Seeker Lambert, but before she can really speak to the man, he holds out his hand and begins to look through her room. He can sense Cole, but despite sensing the young man, he is not able to see him. After not finding anything unusual, he comments on how the tower has just put him on edge and hands Evangeline a bundle of lyrium vials. He goes on to tell her that her task on this mission is more than just keeping the mages safe. If they find out that the Rite of Tranquility is flawed, and if it is shown to have any weaknesses at all, she is to make sure that secret never leaves the western approach. Evangeline agrees, and Cole is left shivering in fear in the corner of her room. Reese is glad to be out of the tower. The air is becoming chilly and the trees are turning orange and yellow around them. Their travels are mostly peaceful. Adrian rides with Reese, afraid of the horse. Wynne lags behind. Reese tries to make small talk with Evangeline. But on the first night, Evangeline calls to halt at an inn, saying that they will stay the night there. Her and Adrian go inside to gather supplies while Wynne and Reese are left alone. Wynne and Reese get into a heated debate, and we learn that Reese only found out that Wynne was his mother about 10 years ago, just after the Blight. He remembers how proud he was to be related to her and how nice and caring she was, but then he never saw her again. And he feels like the woman she is now isn't who she was when he met her. Reese feels the disconnect between them. The woman he met wouldn't have told the mages to endure rather than hope for better, and he wonders if this is the fate of all mages, to lose hope and just learn to endure. Chapter 7. Evangeline is starting to find the tension in the traveling group exhausting. The relationship between Reese and Wynne have made the whole group grow quiet, and Evangeline thinks back on their relationship with her own mother. The two never got along, with her mother wanting a more ladylike life for her daughter. It wasn't until her death that Evangeline realized that her resentment towards her mother was misplaced, and that she really only wanted the best for her. Her father had died when she was in the White Spire, and as Evangeline was an unmarried woman, could not take up her inheritance. So her father's vineyards and the lands he worked so hard to acquire was given to her uncle, who had apparently lost the money and land to a Navaran merchant. It's 4 days since the group had left, and they've taken mostly less traveled roads to stay away from the public. What was odd, however, was that she saw no Imperial enforcers. Despite being a usual sight in the past, at the moment they were nowhere to be seen. Combine that with a pillar of smoke in the distance and pilgrims talking of battles, there was some commotion brewing in Orlais. At camp one night, they talk about what they have seen, and Wynne pipes up that she believes it's Grand Duke Gaspard making his move for the crown. Evangeline questions how she would even know this, and Wynne recounts that the Duke had arranged to meet her and recruit her to his war efforts, but she refused. Adrian is shocked that Wynne never told anyone about her meeting with the Grand Duke, but Wynne remarks that it was better for her not to. Not only is she Ferelden and wouldn't be believed, but in all wars, mages are usually seen as major assets and heroes. Her silence can ensure that the Arlesian circles can use their presence in the Civil War to their advantage. Both Evangeline and Reese are uncomfortable with her attitude, but they say nothing. The next morning, Evangeline takes the group to a small town of Belen for the night, her old hometown. Eventually they come to an inn, and the place goes silent when they enter. The innkeeper is nice, giving them a nice table and fetching food and drink for the group, as he knows that they are likely to pay very well. Wynne orders dwarven ale, saying that she acquired a taste for it when in Orzammar. Adrian is surprised and takes her up on a bet that she can drink more than Wynne. Reese and Evangeline share a bottle of wine, or mostly Reese. Adrian ends up not holding her alcohol very well, and the group talks about Wynne's time during the Blight. At this point, Adrian notices that her cup is empty, stands up too quickly, and almost falls over. "Be careful, Adri," Rhys warns, grabbing her shoulder out of concern. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and bleary affection. "Oh, you haven't called me that since..." He attempted to look blasé, but failed. "You're drunk," he muttered. Adrian reached up and cupped his cheek, her expression suddenly so tender and sad that Evangeline felt embarrassed to watch. Rhys reddened and gently removed her hand, his grin apologetic. "I didn't realize you two were..." Wynne left the thought unfinished, clearly uncertain how to end it. Rhys glanced at her, his eyes flashing with annoyance. "We're not. All evidence to the contrary. I said we're not." Wynne jokes that Rhys shouldn't feel embarrassed about his past relationship with Adrian, and that she had done similar things with the Templar years ago, as evidence for Rhys existing. Rhys is shocked to learn that his father was a Templar, but before much comes to that, a man interrupts them. He is angry with them. They can sit there laughing while one of their own try to kill the divine. Adrian stands up to defend herself, and when she begins to summon magic, Evangeline also stands up and stops the argument. The man is surprised that she will protect the mages, but she states that this is her duty. Evangeline is able to calm the crowd enough to make them leave. When the innkeep comes out of hiding, she pays him and asks if they can hide in his hayloft for the night. He agrees and apologizes for the way the rest of the village is acting. Rhys had snuck out of the barn while the others had slept, and now he creeps around town. Yesterday, Rhys had noticed that someone was following them, and when Evangeline never noticed them, he realized who it was. Eventually, Rhys is able to find Cole in the rain shivering miserably. He asks what Cole is doing, and he says that he has to warn him about the orders that Evangeline was given, and that his life is in danger. He tells Cole that he has to go back to the tower, giving him simple directions on how to get back by following the main roads. Cole apologizes again, but says that he won't go. He needs to keep Rhys safe, and off he runs into the night. Coming back to the barn, he spots Evangeline awake and looking for him. She goes on to tell him that sneaking around is dangerous with the men in town already wary of them, and she asks what he was doing. Instead of answering, he asks her bluntly about her orders, and she doesn't deny them. She asks again, and he gives an honest answer this time. He tells her the story of Cole, that no one can see him, that this was who he was fighting with, but Rhys leaves out that Cole is also the murderer. He can tell she doesn't quite believe his story. He jokes that he expected her to kill him for the story, and she rolls his eye, quipping back that perhaps he's just drunk. And as they head back to the barn, he thinks that Evangeline is a lovely woman, and that Cole needs to head back to the tower. Chapter 8. The next morning was clear and calm. Rhys thinks back on his days in the Book Emporium's consulate in Teravim. He had been the apprentice to an aging elven man named Arvin. He had never liked working under Arvin, and was excited to learn that the man would be moving from the White Spire to work in Deventer. He was even more excited that he would be able to go with him. Deventer was new and exciting for Rhys, but despite it all, he was still not welcome. Even though he was just a boy, his accent would give away his nationality, and locals would treat him with hostility. This would eventually make him the target of 3 older boys who picked a fight with him. Rhys used magic to harm one of the boys, who ended up hurting him badly with magic in turn. This fight would make Arvin send Rhys back to Orlais. Arvin would take care of Rhys from afar, including sponsoring him to become a senior enchanter later in life. He was told later that Arvin was killed, likely from poison, and he was probably a spy rather than an advisor all those years ago. The group's travels become even more strained, with Evangeline speaking less and less with Rhys. Wynne and Adrian took notice, and Rhys eventually tells them about Cole as well, although Adrian is able to piece together that Cole is the killer. Wynne seems convinced that he is some sort of spirit, although Rhys protests. Adrian is also angry at Rhys for hiding Cole for so long, and as such, the rest of their travels are awkward. Adrian begins to ride with Wynne, and the two argue over matters of the circle for most of the time. In time, the land starts to become drier, and they finally reach the cold sands of the western approach. Wynne points to a large tower in the distance. They are to follow these landmarks to reach their destination. She also goes on to explain more about the man they are searching for. He's an elven man named Pharamond, and he lived in Adamant Fortress along with a few hundred people. He was researching at the fortress as the veil was extremely thin there. She isn't sure about the details of his research, but he was sponsored by the Chantry to study the Rite of Tranquility. Wynne had found out about his fate when trying to help another friend, and saw that the fortress was filled with demons, and then she left for help. During their journeys across the sand, Evangeline points out figures in the distance. Darkspawn. Wynne tells them that they won't attack until the nighttime. The group reaches the tower before nightfall, but they do not make a campfire and fear that they will draw the attention of the spawn. Reese stands on the edge of the abyssal rift, thinking of what would happen if he fell. As he stands in silence, a voice calls out that Evangeline is angry with him. It's Wynne. She's worried about how close he is to the edge, and he asks if she is mad at him. And then, suddenly, he is hit with an arrow. It's the Darkspawn. Reese and Wynne begin to fight, but he blacks out before the fight is over. Chapter 9. Evangeline smiles at Reese when he awakens on his horse, and Adrian makes sure he stays balanced. Wynne, looking a lot paler than she did, remarks that he is okay now and that she healed him. Evangeline takes a serious tone, telling him not to wander off again, or else. Finally, Adamant Fortress is in view, a large pillar of smoke in the air. Standing in front of the fortress gates, they realize that their horses are standing on corpses. Wynne explains that the bodies are of the possessed corpses of those who lived in the fortress, and that her and a friend fought and killed them when she was here before. When Reese questions who her friend is, the group spots men on horses, and Evangeline recognizes them from the White Spire. It's more Templars. She goes over to talk with them, speaking to their leader, a man named Armand. He says that he was sent by the Lord Seeker to make sure that Evangeline's task is complete. She tells them to stay outside the fortress until their return, and they agree. The group then enters the fortress. The only thing that seemed out of place was a statue that stood at the base of the stairs. It seemed crudely built, about 7 feet tall, and made of bulky stone and crystals. An odd choice for a statue, truly, and not at all like the fine sculpture she would expect to see in an Orlesian castle. Then the statue moved. Shayla is introduced to the others by Wynne. She explains that this is her friend, a golem with the soul of a dwarf trapped inside, and she was searching for Pharamond to see if he could make Shale a dwarf again. To enter the fortress, Shale yanks off the door, heading inside, and off the group goes. Inside, blood and gore cover the walls, although no bodies are found. There's also writing on the walls. While most of it cannot be read, the words, "We want out," are clear. What's curious, Evangeline notes, is that the door was barred from the inside. Someone must have sealed them in. And off they go, heading into the depths of the fortress towards Pharamond's laboratory. Cole has been following Reese. He had considered going back, but wanted to stay by his friend. While in the western approach, Cole had gotten close to a Darkspawn, and while I had smelled him, it didn't see him. He heard Reese's scream from the attack, but was too scared to move from the Darkspawn. And worse, there was music. He didn't know what it was, but it seemed to come from far, far off. It called to him, but not in a pleasant way. It had an urgency that sped his heart and made his blood burn. The dark creatures, the lurkers, they listened to it. He didn't know how he knew that, but he could feel them out there, craning their necks, raising taloned hands towards the call. When he gets closer to Adamant Fortress, he recognizes Big Nose in the group of Templars outside, but more importantly, something in the fortress, and it feels like terror. When he gets inside, he hears whispers telling him to be afraid, and he is. He calls out for Reese, but gets no response. He heads up in the fortress and finds what seems to be living quarters of those who used to live there. He roams around for over an hour, blood everywhere, but no bodies in sight. But suddenly, he feels a familiar pull. Someone is there. Someone who can see him. He can hear their heartbeat and feel their despair. His senses lead him into what was once a rich bedroom and finds a trapdoor under the carpet. Inside, a woman yelps as the door opens. Cole can tell she has been there for a while. She asks if he is there to kill her. Cole thinks back on what Reese would think and finally tells her that he will not. He turns away to find Reese, but she calls out to him, begging him not to go. She says that something will kill him, the things that come out at night. Cole asks her what her name is, and she replies to Brissa. He tells her that he has to look for Reese, and that there are men on horses outside who can help her. He awkwardly pats her soldier for comfort. And as she flees to the entrance, Cole then heads off into the depths of the fortress. Chapter 10. Evangeline and Reese banter about the blood and gore as they travel down into the fortress, much to Adrian's dismay. Although Reese isn't sure if it's about the dark jokes they are making or that he was talking with Evangeline. Perhaps both. Eventually they begin to hear movements, and finally find what has happened to all the bodies. Twisted creatures move around what was once a barracks, and they notice the group. Shale and Evangeline take the front, fighting as much as they can before Adrian, Wynne, and Reese begin to use magic. Eventually, Adrian calls out that there are too many and begins to channel a powerful spell. Reese calls out that, as Evangeline is right in the way, she will be killed, but Adrian ignores this. Before she's able to cast, Reese runs to Evangeline and tackles her, getting her out of the way of the powerful fire spell just in time. The monsters are burned up and Adrian passes out from the effort. Reese fears her dead, but she wakes up and he laughs in relief. The group then heads to Pharamond's laboratory. When they get there, it looks untouched compared to the rest of the place, with the exception of a twisted-looking elven man sitting in a chair. Before they can get closer, Wynne points to runes on the floor, warning them not to cross them. Evangeline examines the runes, saying that they are the type used by the Tranquil. Pharamond had set up the circle in case he had been possessed. This had been the expected outcome of whatever he was doing. Evangeline expresses fear that no good can come with whatever he was studying, and Wynne argues that they still must save Pharamond. The demon calmly hints that Evangeline is there to stop them and that Rhys knows about it. The group argues about this information before Rhys states that it wants to cause terror in the group. "Yes, heroically done," the demon applauded him, smirking. "Perhaps you should tell your companions why you didn't inform them of the Templar's mission, Rhys. They might not think you such a hero then." "I didn't tell them because I knew this would happen." "Oh, not because you sought the Templar's favor? Protection from the fate that awaits your return to the tower?" "No!" "I see," it nodded. "Then perhaps it is merely the Templar you wish to protect. She is a pretty thing, is she not?" Adrian glares at Rhys, and Wynne yells to ignore the demon before anything else is said. Wynne calls out that they need to head into the Fade, and she begins to set up the ritual. The three mages take places around the binding circle, and Wynne empties raw lyrium into a bowl, a vapor rising from it and surrounding the three mages. Once the vapor surrounded all three of them and connected with itself, Rhys begins to feel himself vibrate out of existence. And then the veil rips open. Discussion. So in Chapter 6, Cole watches Evangeline undress, and this whole part is just a bit odd to me. On one hand, it's a young man watching a woman change without her knowledge. On the other hand, the action isn't sexual in nature. What's interesting is that in Dragon Age Inquisition, Cole explains that he has not felt sexual attraction, while in Asunder, he says this. He used to watch the mages as well, fascinated with their daily routines, and that included when they changed their clothes and prepared for sleep. Eventually, it lost its appeal. It made him feel like a child pressing his face up against a window, peering into a warm and cozy room he could never enter. It lost its appeal. Technically, that could be anything, including non-sexual things like curiosity, but it almost read to me that at one point there was a sexual lean towards the actions. I think this is just another piece of how different the two Coles are. While Inquisition Cole acts like the sweet, pure cinnamon bun we have all grown to know and love, Asunder Cole leans more into the dangerous, creepy, and strange side. There's just a bit more bite to this Cole, in that he even makes me, the reader, uncomfortable with his actions. Yash mentions, when Cole was in Evangeline's room, he found a sitting wolf statue with baleful red gems in the eyes. That sounds a lot like Fen'Harel because the statues in the Dalish camps and Origins were in a sitting position, and the descriptions of the gems as baleful on top of that would be quite the coincidence. The fact that Evangeline has it probably has some significance, but there wasn't any follow-up that I noticed. Honestly, I completely thought this too. The book goes into detail about the figure that Cole picked up, but to my memory, there isn't any reason to do so in the future either. There is no closure on why this statue was described so much. As wolves would become so important to the story of Dragon Age as a whole, and how Fen'Harel even makes a small cameo in Masked Empire, I wonder if perhaps this has some connection, but then you have to ask, why in her room? Why does she have it? Why everything? Honestly, for all we know, it was something that was planned to be important but never was. I'm left with just as many questions as you all. I will say though, as a follow-up, there was some interview somewhere, I don't remember where it is, but Evangeline was planned to be an Elven Templar a long time ago. I wonder if this statue is a relic from that time, and that just in editing, it was left as either an Easter egg or just for funsies, or they just kind of forgot to take it out. So maybe once upon a time, Templar Evangeline was supposed to be an Elven Templar that was working for Fen'Harel? I don't know. So I want to say this now, Lord Seeger Lambert is being very coy about the truth of the Rite of Tranquility. He is making it sound like something could be found, but he is unsure, when in reality he knows damn well that the rite could be reversed, which is why he's asking Evangeline to cover it up in the first place. Matilda says, I may be reading into it too much, but when Evangeline comments on Kindle page 109 how Templars wear armor and how unnecessary it seems, I wonder if this says something about the relationship of Templars and mages. The Templars are there to protect the mages, but is the armor there to protect the Templars from the mages? I can't imagine a good relationship can ever be between mages and Templars if Templars are just waiting to be attacked by the people they are meant to protect. To me, the armor symbolizes that the Templar Order have been preparing for the Mage Rebellion for longer than the mages have. It also speaks to Evangeline's character and how she feels that she is not facing any threat within the circle, and mages are essentially good people. And I never thought of this, so thanks for pointing it out. What Wynne sends about the Grand Duke's plan in Chapter 7 is basically what we'll be seeing in Masked Empire, so spoilers, I guess. I didn't really go into detail in the summary because we'll just be reading about it during the Masked Empire, but know that this is another reference to that book. When the group enters Belen, they see 3 men in cages either dead or dying. These men are criminals. What's interesting is that the signs above their head are in Dwarven runes. They do this because no one knows how to read. What I don't understand, and maybe this is just me, is how do people who can't read be able to understand the runes? Are Dwarven runes more like hieroglyphics because that's something we haven't seen before? Even in the Stolen Throne, the runes sound more like a system of writing than pictures. In Chapter 7, we learn that the girl from Chapter 1 is from this village of Belen, and that her father was named Jean Petit. Fun facts! It's interesting to learn about Rhys's time in Tevinter, although, at least from this chapter, we don't really know why or how a mage of the Chantry was able to live in Tevinter, or what Arvin was studying, or spying on, or anything like that. One thing that caught my eye was that the town he was staying in dumped their sewage in the streets, yet had Dwarven pumps for fountains. You'd think that a city that old would have some sort of plumbing system or something. What's interesting about Wynne for this entire book is that she's actually very right about Cole. He's a spirit, but something unlike anything they've ever seen before. And I think she gets this viewpoint from her possession by a spirit of faith, which is something we'll go to later in the novel. What I find peculiar is that Rhys mentions that the woman he met 10 years ago would have fought for the honor of the mages, not keep blind faith in the Chantry system. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the spirit of faith inside her. As seen with Anders, it takes a bit for a spirit to influence a person sometimes. And what if that happened so slowly for Wynne she never noticed? What if Wynne did corrupt the spirit of faith into a spirit of blind faith, or something similar? Or at least set it out on that path? This is just something to think about as the book continues. So I'll be the first to admit I don't know much about, I guess you'd call this geology? I don't know. But the Western approach is said to be like a desert, but mostly cold. Is that a thing? Like, I know there are frozen deserts, but there's snow in them, I thought, not just like pure sand like this is. So can this happen? And either way, in Inquisition, it's described as more hot. Perhaps in Inquisition, we are in the areas in the summer rather than near the winter like they are in Asunder. Is this possible? I don't know. Let me know if you know more than me on this. But not only does the Western approach seem to differ in temperature, it also differs in color. In the novel, the sands are supposed to be purple, probably from the blight that had happened. Granted, you can see patches of this in the game, but in the book it talks like this is the entire thing and not just patches. Also, fun facts, apparently you can see auroras in the Western approach. Yosh also pointed out something interesting. The appearance of Adamant Fortress has also changed. Its description in the book reminds me more of Griffin Wing Keep. It has a single courtyard with stairs leading up to the main door to the interior. Since the book was published 3 years before Inquisition, I think it's quite likely that Griffin Wing Keep evolved from this concept of Adamant, and the introduction to Adamant Fortress on the Dragon Age Inquisition website even has a screenshot of Griffin Wing Keep. That's all really compelling evidence, and I would totally believe this. Things change in games so much, and we know that a lot of things in Inquisition were changed and replanned around, but yeah, that sounds about right, honestly. Also, I feel like Gaider doesn't know how to end fight scenes very well. Like 9 times out of 10, I feel like they always end with someone passing out, and the person who passes out also happens to be the person who was narrating at the time. An interesting fact is that Shale doesn't see herself as female, but rather a golem. I guess to her, golems do not have a gender. Perhaps this is why she calls everyone an it and refuses to learn names. Also, something to question is why Wynne thought Pharamond would know how to reverse Shale's transformation into a golem. So Cole can hear the calling, but what is more interesting, the calling seems to keep him real, so to speak. Listen to this. Sometime during that night, exhaustion overcame him. It wasn't sleep. It was a torment of strange dreams. Memory stirred in him like old wounds, ripping open and spewing forth rot. He saw faces, but didn't know why they terrified him. He was hiding, but it wasn't between 2 rocks. It was somewhere else, somewhere dark and small that lay in the distant past. He wanted nothing more than to get out and run. And then he woke. The music reached a tendril down into the dark waters he floundered in and dragged him up into the light. The music dragged him into the light. Strange. There really isn't that much lore involving demons and spirits in the Blight, so this interaction just really interests me. What I think is cool about the Cole-Debrissa interaction is that Cole is culled by an intense feeling of despair, which makes a lot of sense going forward. Back to going over the Bioware canon, it seems that Wynne and Shale had both been present in Redcliffe when Arl Eamon's son Connor had been possessed by a demon, and that the Warden had chose to enter the Fade to deal with the possession, and also the Warden had used the mages to help enter the Fade rather than blood magic. Something that Anana brings up: it's my little butthurt, but Polish nouns are all gendered, and it bothers the heck out of me when everyone in the book uses male forms of Warden and Hero, especially Wynne. You English-speaking people have it better. Which, this is super interesting about languages. So this is something I know about languages, but yeah, English we don't have a lot of gendered words, to be honest. So I just never thought of this. If you are reading this book in another language, is your Warden also using the male forms? Like Anna says, the Warden in English is gender neutral, and I don't believe it's ever hinted at one way or another of what the gender of the Warden is, which, in fact, at least according to, the base choices in the Dragon Age Keep, which seem to be the official Bioware canon, the Warden is actually a woman, so, fun facts. And with that, thank you to everyone who submitted entries, and I look forward to what everyone comes up with next. If you have any comments, artwork, or anything else, please send it in. Our next section will consist of chapters 11 through 15 of Asunder, and please send me your comments, artwork, literally anything, by September 30th, 2018. Either comment below, send me an email at gildathon@gmail.com, tweet at gildathon on Twitter, or PM user Gillanon on Reddit. The rest are all.